Of course, heaven is leisure. There remaineth a rest for the people of God. But I picture it pretty vigorous too, as our best leisure really is. Whether that is best pictured as surf bathing, or like endlessly exploring a wonderful country, or endlessly reading a glorious story, who knows? Dante says, heaven grew drunken with its universal laughter. This is Pints with Jack, Season 9, Episode 4, The Joy of Narnia. After Hours with Terry Lindvall, as well as Cary and Caroline Joseph.
Have you been looking everywhere, searching for a place where you belong? Away from the masses, among clinking glasses, where the hearth fire is on. Let the laughter welcome you in, that eagle and child din. There's room at this table, so take a seat and tuck right in. Pints with Jack. Pints with Jack.
Welcome, friends, to Pints with Jack. It's our 4th episode of the season, and it's an After Hours interview. And since today's opening quotation was from a letter to Mrs. Johnson from C.S. Lewis about laughter, it's hardly a surprise that we have returning to us special guest Terry Lindvall. Terry Lindvall is the elder twin born in Basel, Switzerland. He wandered about the world with his family as his father was an army chaplain. He taught at Azusa Pacific University, Wheaton College, Regent University, Duke Divinity School, the College of William and Mary, and is presently ensconced in the C.S. Lewis Chair of Communication and Christian Thought at Virginia Wesleyan University. He is the author of a number of books on cinema, as well as God Mocks, a history of religious satire from the Hebrew prophets to Stephen Colbert, and Surprised by Laughter, revised and updated, the comic world of C.S. Lewis. And that's what we spoke about the last time that he was on. But today, Terry is joined by Cary and Caroline Joseph, and we'll find out a little bit more about them shortly. But together, they are the authors of The Joy of Narnia, Teaching Laughter to Middle School Students. Terry, Cary, Caroline, welcome to Pints with Jack.
Good. Thank you.
Glad to be here.
We really soldiered through all the technical difficulties possible, but we are now here. And Terry, it's been 5 seasons since you were last on the show. What have you been up to?
I've been falling down a lot, spilling food on my clothing. It happens when you get older. But basically, It's been a really kind of wonderful 5 years. I produced a feature film called Hollywood Teaches to Pray. I've written a couple books on animated film parables, kind of short films. I've led tours to Oxford and to Belfast. In fact, my wife and I stayed in the Crawford's Burn Inn, the honeymoon hotel where Joy and Jack stayed. Of course, I had the Irish flu, so there was no arrows. Lots of Storge all over the place. But also, I think probably that one of the best things that's happened is I've had a granddaughter that we'll hear about more later, and a upcoming grandson, Charles Edward Joseph V, coming along. So it's been, I haven't been productive there, but outside my kind of realm, I've seen things happen. So it's really good to be back with you.
And when I first saw you come on Riverside, it looked like you had an eye patch. And so I just assumed you were pretending to be a pirate.
Pirate, it's Halloween.
I have a pirate joke, and then you can tell me why you're wearing that. Why do pirates be called pirates?
Because they like pie?
Because they are.
They are.
Well, that gets to, I went in yesterday for some Mohs surgery on my cheek. And the surgeon, I won't give his name, it's just a funny guy. He knew that I had written books on laughter. So all the way through, during 3 different stages of kind of cutting my cheek, he would go, oops, oops, oops. But finally, he went, oh, shit. And then I knew I was in trouble. So basically, it's just kind of this pirate scar that I'm going to have. So it scares my granddaughter.
That his granddaughter's terrified of it. Yep, terrified.
He's going to end up looking like a Bond villain. It'll be great.
Yes.
You sure will.
So, Cary and Caroline, who are you, and how did you become entangled with this jester?
Well, I've been entangled with this jester for about 31 years of my life. So he's my dad, and yep, he's taught me a lot about laughter and life and love and all of it. But then I got entangled. Yeah,
I married into this whole mess. And we're both middle school teachers. Terry was nice enough or thoughtful enough to include us in his latest work, and it's been a blast.
And we met at James Madison University. In fact, Cary here was making fun of me as we were writing notes for this today. I wrote, "We met at JMU," and he was like, "You forgot? You need a reminding." So, and I always knew I wanted to marry a Brit, and so he's a half Brit. That's what I got stuck with. Huh?
One other little kind of side note to that: every book I write, I change my license plate. So, for example, when I wrote a book on satire and religion, my license plate said Erasmus. So by the time that Caroline went to JMU, on her license plate was Erasmus. And it just so happened the day they met, Cary came up, he saw the car, and he quoted Erasmus. And so I knew, and so on the cover of the book, you'll see something from the Praise of God.
To my credit, I had like a quote of the day thing or something, calendar or whatever, or app. And it was 2 days before I had just seen one, and it was a pretty good one. I was like, oh, hey, wait. And so it was, more of a convenience thing, coincidental, than it was
some say fate.
Yeah, we could call it fate, but it certainly had nothing to do with my intelligence.
Well, actually, on the Christian History Almanac this morning, they did a little bit of focus on some of the great debates of history, and they were talking about Erasmus and Luther. So I'm sure in your marriage it hasn't been it's had the same sort of dynamic.
Right, exactly.
Hopefully a little bit more cordial. But let's get on and talk drinks. Since I absolutely hated middle school, because the subtitle of your book is The Joy of Narnia, Teaching Laughter to Middle School Students, I thought I'd go with Angry Orchard cider. What are you guys drinking?
Well, I stole my dad's Pints with Jack cup, but alas, I'm 6 months pregnant, so I have water in here.
It's still scientifically proven to improve the drink 20%.
Right.
So
I know. I figured.
Cary?
I'm partial to a Guinness. I'll always have a Guinness. I'm happy with Guinness, but I think in solidarity today it's just water. So.
No solidarity here. I'm with St. Brendan because basically he formed the whole scaffolding to Voyage of the Dawn Treader. So to St. Brendan and his Irish cream, so good.
I love that. Well, let's do that. To St. Brendan and all other middle school teachers. Cheers.
Yes, amen.
Actually, I have some Dr. Pepper too, some Diet Dr. Pepper.
So you like your smart soft drinks. Even they have to have PhDs.
Yes.
They do.
And actually, I put this at the top of my list of questions. Do any of you have a joke to share? And I do have to say that as a father, I'm particularly partial to puns and dad jokes in general. But do you have any to offer us?
Yeah, sure. We got the toddler. We've got another one coming. So I've been worried a lot about finances and things like that, and not just saving for college, which is going to be astronomical by the time these kids are of that age, but also just like saving for retirement so we have some money. So I signed up for our company or our school district's 401k. The only problem is I don't know that I can run that far. So it's terrible.
Okay, let me throw one in honor of drinking pints. I've got one about Noah and his wife, Naamah. And after 40 days of being in the ark, they're sitting on the deck at the end, and they both have a glass of wine, and they're sitting there drinking the wine. And Naamah, Noah's wife, says, "I couldn't have gotten through this without you. I love you." And Noah says, "Is that you or the wine speaking?" And she says, "Hush, I'm talking to the wine." So it's an old Noah joke.
Well, when you spoke about Noah's wife, I immediately thought of Bill and Ted's Most Excellent Adventure, and because in there we find out that Joan of Arc is his wife instead.
Yes.
Well, my favorite joke at the moment is, why do crabs never volunteer?
Why do crabs never?
Because they're shellfish.
Shellfish. You're so
Shellfish.
shellfish. So shellfish.
That joke's particularly well if you are Sean Connery.
Yes.
This is my son, Alexander. Hey, bud.
Hi, Alexander.
Hi.
Oh.
Hey, dude.
Hi there.
Could you share with the lovely people the poem that we did?
Does anyone want my jellyfish? I'm not silly fish.
Oh,
Thanks, bud. So, Terry, let's start with you. This isn't the first book you've been part of. It's not even your first book on the subject of humor and laughter. It's not even your first book on that subject through the lens of C.S. Lewis. So, why write yet another book?
Well, basically, this started out as an academic article for a significant journal of Lewis. But when I turned it in, it was kind of a revise and resubmit. And they, first of all, I said, it's too long. You digress too much, and we can't use your cartoons. And one of the primary reasons I did this book is because my friend John Loyne is a 95-year-old cartoonist who was the original cartoonist for Christianity Today. And I wonder, he makes me laugh all the time. We meet every Thursday. He still makes me laugh, and I want to keep him alive. So I said, I had to give him work. And so I said, John, draw these cartoons. So that was kind of the primary thing that happened on. But then I had a former student, Robert Woods, who started a new press. What was it called? Kind of Integratio Press. And he said, would you kind of write something on Lewis? And I said, basically, I've been in film and animation for the last 20, 30 years, writing in that area. And I need to come back to Lewis. But I had to go get some fresh material from my son-in-law and my daughter. And so coming to them, we decided, let's see if we can do something on helping the problem that middle school kids have. And that's the inability to laugh, how they've lost their laugh by the time they get to middle school. And so we conspired and we came together and we did it.
And I will say the editing process happened when I was about maybe a month postpartum. Our daughter was about a month old. So, Dr. Lindvall would come over and in our sleep-deprived state say, what's wrong with this sentence? Why
aren't you finished yet?
Why aren't you finished yet?
Yeah, all you're doing is just lying about having a baby.
Yeah.
You've got plenty of time.
The other thing I think that's really important here from Lewis is that in Christian Apologetics, an essay he wrote, he said, the problem is that we write too many books on Christianity instead of books with our Christianity latent. And I thought maybe we write too many books on Lewis and we just have to have our Lewis latent. And so what we really were doing, we're kind of saying, let's talk about laughter in middle school, but we'll have Lewis kind of sneak in and introduce him kind of obliquely, kind of on the side, and surprise people indirectly with what he has to say. And so it was this kind of strategy as well.
And what was it that you were hoping that readers get out of this in particular?
So as the teachers here, we know that a lot of middle school teachers, especially all teachers, don't really have time to parse through hefty academic writing. So that is where those tidbits really come in handy that we'll kind of touch on later. But the tidbits are really for the teachers and hoping that there are things that they can kind of get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, teaching is such a difficult job. And I think the idea was we could remind middle school teachers that, like, if you can enjoy the work, then the kids, take that into account, and then it creates a more positive environment and it fosters positive relationships with students. So, from our perspective, it's the teachers. Now, there's a lot of all this, C.S. Lewis information in there as well. So, you gotta get through that if you want the teaching tidbits too. So.
Chesterton said, he said, basically, one of the most effective ways to teach a truth is through laughter. And basically, if we can get people to kind of laughing, we think they become open to hearing other messages that we might have for them.
Well, we've just started doing a little bit of pre-kindergarten homeschooling for my son. And so I've been reading out some of the tidbits to my wife. It's like, I think we could do this one. I might see if I can splice it in, because I had been recording at the time when, because my son, he wandered into the room and wanted to see what I was doing. Yeah. And so I had him, each morning we do some Bible and then we do some poetry. And normally the poetry is 4-line stanzas, 3 stanzas maybe. But there was a really short one yesterday morning that he absolutely adored. Well, I think he saw how funny I found it, and so he's just now been repeating it to everybody to try and get a similar sort of reaction. So I think, it did seem to come across as this would be perfect for teachers of any kind, and also since parents are the first teachers of their children, I think it's got some really good jumping off points to try and talk about the subject of laughter with
right.
my son, because he is trying to work out humor at the moment, and kids sometimes they don't get it, and so particularly when they've hung around other kids, even sometimes mean kids who do something horrible to somebody and then think it's funny. This is what humor is, and so then they try and do that at home, and then they get sent into timeout.
Yes, right.
You're practicing. I think one of our major insights in the whole book is that we are here to model laughter. And when we laugh, all of a sudden they have a permission to laugh. Recently, I'm writing a book right now on Kierkegaard and Pixar films, and just went out and interviewed Pete Docter. And that's the one thing, I mean, they were learning too. We asked them, how do you teach laughter? What kind of laughter do you have in your films? And they hadn't thought of that before, of saying basically in films, when you see someone laughing, you laugh with them. Now, it could be like Beavis and Butthead and really kind of an evil laughter, or it can be something like the sloth in Zootopia where you laugh slowly. But modeling laughter for our students is a way to make them laugh, make them free to laugh.
Yes.
Because they get so uptight.
Well, let's take a little tour through the book. And Caroline, the first chapter is entitled C.S. Lewis and Laughter. Now, obviously, your dad has written an entire book on this subject before. So was he really just phoning this chapter in, or did he actually have something different to say?
Well, you're catching me in the act here. I've never read his other book.
Nobody has here.
But I tell you, so from what I know, there are some different things, of course, just based on how things have been framed in this book. And the big thing is just we're introducing those 4 types of laughter that Lewis does talk about, and that we see as Screwtape does lecture Wormwood too in the Screwtape letters. So we really touch, and this goes throughout the whole book, joy, fun and play, and then the joke proper jokes, and then flippancy. So those are the big things we're kind of looking at in this chapter. The part I really find interesting is what Lewis says and what we talk about in this chapter about appearing childish. And so he kind of discusses how the fear of being seen as childish can be childish in itself. Like we want so badly to be adults sometimes, and there is space, like we were just talking about, there's space to laugh, to model that laughter in adulthood, that we don't have to always appear so grown up. So that's really, I think, the challenge as teachers too, is you want that balance between, yes, we are here to learn, but we also are here to have a good time and be together and be happy.
And you mentioned them a little bit earlier. Throughout these books, there are these tidbit asides. Cary, can you just tell us a little bit about what these are, what they're for, and maybe share some of your favorites?
Of course, yeah. They're for those busy teachers that are gonna, they don't have the time to read the whole book. They're gonna flip through and find the little tidbits. The publisher did a fantastic job of setting those out so that they're really easy to see and really easy to understand. So the idea is to try to make things practical for somebody, a parent, a teacher, to actually use them. The one I remember from the first chapter actually was it was a reminder that not every student or child is going to find you funny, and that's okay. I had a student once. I was meeting with students one-on-one in the beginning of the year, getting to know them, talking to them about what they like to do and what they like to read and stuff like that. And when I finished having she was very, short and curt with me the whole time. And I was like, anything else you want me to know? Anything else I should know? And she goes, yeah, I don't really get your whole funny guy thing. And I said, okay. But, it was a great moment. I had to really level with her and be like, yeah, you don't have to think I'm funny, but we got to figure out a way to work together. At the heart of all of this, it's not about performing for your students. It's about kind of creating an environment where laughter and joy are available for all and encouraged. So yeah, I think by the end of the year, I got her to chuckle once when I fell out of my chair or something. But that was, I'll take that. I'll take that.
Yeah, sometimes you have to try very different kinds of humor.
Yeah.
I did have an autistic student, very bright, one of my brightest students, autistic, and she said, before taking a class in film comedy, she said, Professor Lindvall, I don't always know what's funny. I can't always catch. And I said, okay, every time I touch my nose, I'm trying to be funny. So if class were going badly, I'd just touch my nose. She would crack up, and the rest of the class would follow suit. I mean, she was the leader of laughter. It was so contagious. But that's something I kept on doing through the whole class.
It's funny you talk about people not always getting certain kinds of humor, because Alexander came to me, I think it was actually this morning. Yeah, as we were having breakfast, he said that he told his poem, his jellyfish poem, to the cousins, and he says, "But they didn't laugh, Daddy." And so I sort of had to walk him through. It's like, yeah, but Daddy tells lots of jokes, and Mummy doesn't always laugh, does she? It's like, no. And he said, "But does Daddy stop because she doesn't always laugh?" He says, "No." It's like, well, there we go. I think there's a lesson for us.
That's a great lesson.
Right.
The first time I heard that 401k joke, he just got silence back. There was nothing.
I know.
Well, as I alluded to earlier, I'm drinking an Angry Orchard because I hated middle school so much. And your second chapter is entitled Laughter in Middle School. And for me, it immediately conjured up memories of children laughing cruelly at each other. So how do you think we can redeem middle school laughter?
I think that's you, Cary.
You want me to start with that one? Okay, I was going to let your dad go. But, so much of middle school, which is, part of their development at that age is trying to find ways to fit in and not stand out. And they like fitting in because it gives them a group, but it also gives them the other, a group that's not part of their group, which, as you can imagine, is a challenge that teachers have to work with and try to avoid. Nowadays, it's like students are obsessed with, they're like meme machines. They love memes. And any sort of viral internet joke, they'll just repeat it over and over and over again. Like the latest one is 6, 7, 2 numbers. It's not funny at all, but they love it. They love it. And if you say, like, if they're like, well, how many sentences should I have in this paragraph? And I'm like, I don't know, like 6 or 7, then I lose the whole class. It's their language. But I think a part of why they like it is, again, it fosters that community, but there's also the people who aren't in the know. And that kind of leans into that cruel kind of, oh, you get it, but you don't, mentality that sort of happens. I think the goal is to flip that on its head. There's nothing wrong with the memes if it's not an inappropriate one. And if the teacher's not in on it, then the rest of the class gets it. There's nothing wrong with that either. Laughing at the teachers is great. Yeah, unified front, exactly. We want students to have that opportunity to forge a community that includes everybody. So I've had a lot of success with little inside jokes, like within a class. So it's like we all get it, but if you're not in that class, you might not get the joke. So they get a little bit of that, like, oh, we're in on it, but like they're all in on it. And what they don't know is I do the same inside jokes from class to class. So they, as soon as they compare notes, they're like, wait a second, he told us that, and then they're all against me in the end. So.
He taught 7th grade English and she taught 8th. And so she'd get his students the next year and they would compare their senses of humor.
Right. A lot of the same kids.
To be fair, most of them said I was funnier.
They did. I was the harsher one. So, but speaking of that, so I was just going to tell a story. Like you were saying about you hated middle school. I loved middle school, but still I feel like every person has a bullying story. And 8th grade, I was called a whale by some boys and I came home crying and told my dad, I said, Dad, a boy called me a whale, and he busted out laughing. And that was his response. And I tell you, that shifted my perspective after some time. Clearly, I've had some looking back at this experience. Not in the moment. I probably was very, very
brings
upset.
It up a lot.
But it is. I think your parents and the adults in your life really do model sometimes how to respond to some cruel things. Dad, I don't know what you were thinking in the moment, but
I look back at my middle school days, and it really helped me cope because I was a very short boy back then. My twin sister was 3 or 4 inches taller than I was. And so we were Army brats. We'd move from place to place. And we ended at middle school. I was in Monterey, California, near Fort Ord. And I remember going to the school and just all these boys were playing basketball and all kinds of sports. And I couldn't keep up with that. So my moment came when I was able to get in front of the class and basically recite a Jonathan Winters story, comic story. And I had them laughing. It was really about a mad professor who had all of these thousands of little men down in his cellar. And he was kind of inventing with them and experimenting. And all of a sudden they all escaped, and somebody says, Doctor, where are all those little men going? He said, after little women, you fool. And I told that joke in middle school. I became the hero of the middle school. All of a sudden, I was hot. And my nickname then became Pee-wee Popcorn. I was so tall, but I was full of energy. And so it was really something that kind of changed, where humor was able to kind of help me to kind of adapt to what was going on. So what you need to do, I think, as teachers sometimes, find the person who wants to be funny and encourage it. The problem is teachers begin to discipline, and they see humor as disruptive to their control, instead of really encouraging that to kind of bring the class together.
And it's even easier if that person is over diminutive stature, because the short jokes will go right over their heads.
Exactly. Thank you.
And earlier when you were talking about that numbers joke, I mean, come on, they should at least try and do the classic one. Why was 10 scared? Because 7, 8, 9.
Yes.
And then you ask the follow-up question, well, why did 7 eat 9? It's because his doctor told him to eat 3 squared meals a day. Because 3 squared is 9. It works at so many levels.
Whoa.
At least that way they're learning some mathematics.
That's a sophisticated one.
They're really oversimplifying it these days. They're just cutting the fluff.
Well, C.S. Lewis, he entitled his spiritual autobiography Surprised by Joy. Yet you only devote one chapter, chapter 3, to the subject of joy. And so I wanted to ask, do you think you're better than C.S. Lewis? The fact that you only need one chapter to do it.
Of course, yeah. He's dead. I'm alive. I'm kidding. Yeah, a live dog better than a dead lion? Yes, of course. Aslan, everything else. But I think joy, we didn't want to go into the kind of the depth that Lewis deals with in his Surprised by Joy or his other works, that idea of yearning, desire, that sensu. But what I do to try to get my students to understand is you use his idea of moving from bios to zoe, moving from being like a statue to coming to full life. And I said, in your classroom, are you just going to sit there like a dead dog, or are you going to have this kind of full experience? And joy is not something you can make up. Joy comes to you when all of a sudden you're recognizing something outside yourself that's been given to you, and you can actually enjoy it. And so to kind of create a climate, as Cary said, of joy and of laughter, it really raises everybody's spirits where they want to come to your class. And it's if you can get students coming to your class regularly, you've done something great in the college level.
And I think one of the biggest pieces in this chapter that we really touch on, it's in a tidbit, is singing and what music can really bring to a classroom. And I know he and I'm sure Dr. Lindvall, you do as well, but we do a lot of that in our rooms. And
dancing.
A lot of dancing. And one of my favorite things I used to do was a book breakup. So when we were turning in our books at the end of a unit, I would always play I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston. And the kids would have to slowly wave and bid adieu to the book. So even if they hated Beowulf, which they did usually, their last memory of that book would be just waving goodbye tearfully. So yeah, that makes it a little more fun. And then if they didn't learn anything in my class by the end of the year, they at least knew that song. So
I can just imagine them driving in a car later in life, listening to the radio, and a Whitney Houston song comes on, and I think, why do I have the need to I want to read a book?
Yeah, right.
Where's Grendel? What is it?
Well, your next chapter is on fun. Unleashed Pleasures of Play. And that one was particularly packed with those tidbit asides. And I think my favorite was encouraging the reader to develop a gamification of curricula. And I work in software, and we are all about gamification to get users to keep using our products. So most people associate fun and games more with elementary school. So how can that fit in a middle school setting?
So when it comes to the gamification thing, that's part of an idea. It's one of the things that I love doing with our curricula throughout. So it's particularly with 7th grade English, what I'll do is I'll take a book club unit, and the unit that we have is all about metaphorical journeys. So there's a lot of fantasy characters and fantasy books that they're reading, and they'll read that with a group of kids, but then they will play as the protagonist in that book in a fictional world that I've created, and every decision that they make as the character has to be based on textual evidence. Well, why would he do that? And all that, and they're interacting with, it kind of functions like D&D. So they have to like roll the dice to see if it's successful. And, if Percy Jackson's going to attack the sea monster, we have to make sure that he does it in a way that makes sense with the text. And so they've got these books memorized by the time we're done because they've just spent so much time building these characters and understanding who they are. And we get to go on a journey ourselves as a class, and they work together as a campaign to move through it. So that's been my favorite type of the gamification. But then there's also so many different ways. I mean, you mentioned, gamifying things in the software world. There's so many different apps and tools online now that you can turn, boring flashcard review things into like these. They have like a snowball fight game on one of the websites where they're all playing against each other and they have to throw snowballs, but then to get more snowballs, you have to answer the questions correctly. And, all of that great stuff. And they love it. They have so much, it gets so loud and they have so much fun. Not every teacher is.
Sometimes the teacher next door pokes
yes, but it is possible, and it is, it's worth it to let them enjoy their learning or their review or whatever it is. Anything that allows them to function like a real world practitioner in whatever we're doing. This past week, I just had my students conduct a mock trial on one of the characters in the book, and they're all dressed up as lawyers. They have like little ties on, and they're taking it very seriously. They're like banging on the table and saying objection. And it felt like a courtroom. It was very serious, and we took it seriously, but they had so much fun. And they just kept talking about it. Oh, when are we going to do another one? So anything that you can incorporate them playing a role or acting as some sort of profession or expert in some field, I mean, they have a blast with that. You did a lot of that with Beowulf too, didn't you? Yeah.
Our Beowulf unit was always the hit of the year. Again, the kids usually didn't like it, but we had 2 huge costume boxes to act out different pieces of it, and that was the best part of the day. When they saw those costume boxes come out, to dress like an Anglo-Saxon was just the highlight.
You guys have resurrected a memory that I'd completely forgotten. I think I was 11 or 12 when we were doing Animal Farm, and we had one period where a few of us had to pretend to be external investigators who had come to the farm near the end. I can't remember where exactly, but we had to find out what had been going on in that farm. And so we would have people come up as witnesses to testify.
Awesome.
I totally forgot about that.
See, and those are the things you remember too.
Oh, yeah.
Well, now he remembers.
Now I remember. Now, I didn't want us to run out of time towards the end and not mention this. So would you now mind telling us about the appendix of this book? Because there is a section curiously titled A Zygomatic Exercise Scripted Plan.
Okay, this comes from my background in biology. And essentially what we do, this kind of breaks my class up and allows them to freedom to laugh. But I start with the idea that the zygomatic is zygoma is the cheekbone and it connects to the bottom of the mouth. And it's kind of the underwear of laughter. It's just not real. It's a fake smile. It's kind of like after class, that was a great lecture, professor, or after church, great podcast there. Okay. Fake smile. Yeah. Then you get to the orbicularis oculus, which is the fine sheath of muscles around the eyes. And this gives us kind of sincerity. It gives us true laughter. So you kind of go zygomatic, orbicularis, okay? And then you do the frontal muscles and the platysma. And I'm condensing all of this. There's other things that happen in between. But the frontal takes you up and the platysma takes you down. So you go zygomatic, orbicularis, frontal, platysma. I said, if you don't want anybody to bother you in the library, you sit like that. Right? Then you go on to the abdominal and the vocal and the kinesic, where basically they are laughing out loud and practicing. And they don't realize, and I have to tell them that fake laughter has the same kind of physiological fruit that any kind of laughter does. And if you practice laughter, you're going to find yourself with kind of endorphins and oxytocins, everything coming into you, and you're going to be feeling much better. And they do. And so it's something that we practice in the classroom where they end up laughing. And just the last part is communal, where you all just rush into each other and you hug and you bump and you fall down. So I've only been sued twice. But it's just kind of a fun exercise that anyone can do. I've done it in churches and other kind of settings, and it works really well with old people.
I'll have to take some screenshots and put them in the show notes so people can see some of the faces that you were pulling there.
Yeah.
Well, the next chapter, you explore the joke proper. You subtitle it The Ingenuity of Wit and Jests.
Mm-hmm.
And telling a joke is always a bit of a risky business because jokes often come from things that we find incongruous or even absurd. You know, often these things relate to gender, such as men refusing to ask for directions. Very often relating to countries. So we're recording this in October, which meant that very recently I texted all my Canadian friends to wish them happy fake Thanksgiving. And as an Englishman living in America, I often bump up against this in both directions, insulting the Americans and vice versa. So how do we navigate this sort of thing with children of middle school age?
Oh, yeah. They certainly have their jokes that they like to pass around that when you're like, it's a joke. Let me hear it. And they're like, no, we're not going to tell you. You're like, okay. But again, anything you can do to kind of foster an inside joke with the group works. They love dad jokes and puns. They act like they don't. They'll pull a whole like, oh, and you're like, okay,
I respond by saying, your boos mean nothing to me. I've seen what makes you cheer.
Yes. I often will just, rather than telling jokes, will tell just funny stories from my own life, which they love. Anything that has to do with failures at dating when you're in high school, or they love those stories. And you keep it, you keep it PG, of course, but you have to be careful too. I know that one of my colleagues, a science teacher, she has a joke of the day that they put on the board. And last year they had a student who really had a hard time with the punchlines because he didn't get the jokes, and he would get like upset and cry. And so you have to be really careful when it comes to joking. I think back to what Terry said about like, having the if I touch my nose, then know that I'm trying to make a joke and it's time to laugh. And, you have to kind of figure out what works and what doesn't. And we'll talk more about flippancy next, of course, because that's kind of the last form of laughter, but just trying to avoid that at all costs. I feel like.
Yep. This was probably one of the most controversial chapters that we had to write because they were afraid I was a little too daring talking about gender. And I have opinions and you can put them into humor. And I've got a lot of kind of 1950s, 1960s humor, which doesn't really translate well in our culture today, but it's still very funny stuff. And so they said, no, we cannot have our names associated with any of my humor.
Yes.
And so a lot of things were left out wisely, I think.
Yeah, we had fun editing that.
Yes, we did. Stayed more awake for that one.
Just manuscripts and written on the side. It's just, Dad, no.
Exactly. You're right. That's exactly what it looked like.
Sometimes I just delete it. I wouldn't even.
But you see, that's why dad jokes, I think, are in particular, they're kind of universal currency, even if people do pretend to not like them, because they are usually fairly inoffensive. Yeah. And do you actually know how you know if something is a dad joke?
Tell us.
It's because the pun is apparent.
Oh, no.
You are full of them. This is great.
I'm on my third child. It's unwell practiced at this point.
But see,
my kids know that Dad will be telling these anyway. It doesn't matter if they or Mum laugh at them; they're just going to keep coming anyway. So they might as well get on board.
Yeah. In the Screw Tape Letters, Lewis says that most of the joke propers deal with sex. And so I had a lot of jokes about sex, but those are the ones that they were really uncomfortable in their environment kind of sharing. So it shows the generations. It'll come back in.
Well, it's funny you say that because I do remember when I was 10 years old and we had the first the talk at school. And I left the class with another boy, Stephen. And as we were walking, we left the class. I can't remember why we were just by ourselves, but maybe we were sent to go fetch something. And as we were walking, we just like looked at each other and just burst out laughing. That was the most hilarious thing we'd ever heard in ages. Right. Well, let's talk about this final chapter, because I think this is the hardest thing to do. And I've got lots of relatives who have been moving through their school years, and particularly then when they get to middle school, and then when the teenage years really start kicking in, flippancy is the chief currency, because it's rarely cool to be excited by anything. Or to think that something is really wonderful. It's just like, they might even be hanging out with their friends, and you ask them, did you have fun? It was okay. and that, I think that definitely is a breeding ground for flippancy, because it means that we're going to basically mock everything. And Lewis has a lot to say about flippancy and all of the ills that it can foster in a person. So how do educators help guard students against this?
Well, the first thing is, I think educators have to confess, like Lewis did, that he was a bully. Simon Horleben at Oxford Now, Medieval Literature, basically said Lewis would take his professor's books and write kind of really sarcastic, cool, flippant kind of verse on the professor. I would love it if my students did that in my books when they're reading. I'd like it if they read the books at all. Open the book, even done a signature. But anyway, I think he had that tendency, and so he wrote that wonderful kind of poem about how when he makes the audience laugh, the angels weep. There is that tendency for an academic to be sarcastic, to be caustic, to find that kind of wit. But it's very, very dangerous. I mean, Voltaire was one of the best, and in Candide, he does a lot of good satire, but he also has kind of a way of being arrogant towards other people. Still, my favorite Voltaire line is, "I'm sitting in the smallest room of the house. I have your letter before me. It will soon be behind me." It's naughty, but I mean, it's just mocking the person. But there's that whole idea of Schadenfreude, to kind of laugh at someone else's misery. And that flippancy just really gets into our soul in middle school and high school. And it's got to be substituted with good, hearty laughter about these same things.
Yeah, I take the time to actually teach, because I'm a 7th grade English teacher. So word study is a part of what we do. And so in the beginning of the year, I'll teach them Schadenfreude, and we'll talk about what it means and what it does, laughing at the pain of others. But, well, how does that exist in your world? And they're like, oh, that's all we do. I mean, they know it. They're well aware. And then I introduce them to Freudenfreude, which is just so much fun to say. And they love saying it, which is, we laugh because other people are having a good time. Yeah. And like you said, there's so much about them at that age, at that kind of adolescence, teenage years, where if you're super excited about something, then it's cringe. Or if you're super, if you're passionate, then you're extra. Like everything has kind of this negative, flippant take to it. And so you really have to kind of just do, it's hard too, because when you're met with sarcasm, it's easy to just be sarcastic right back. And so I think one of the things that I found in the classroom is trying to kind of stop that reactive kind of muscle from just throwing back sarcastic comments.
And it's a slippery slope, I think, sometimes in the classroom, because I had one student, I remember him very well because he was an expert at flippancy. He was very sarcastic and it started as funny. And so I would laugh too. But then throughout the year, you could really tell that it was affecting the class culture. People were scared to speak out because they knew they were going to get joked or mocked. So I eventually did have to sit him down and have a conversation and say, look, this is not the place for this. So sometimes it's not always fun and games. You do have to set the clear boundaries and make it known that, no, this is not, if people are feeling left out, feeling like this is cruel, we got to stop.
Yeah, the book of Proverbs talks about the man who shoots jokes at another person, like shooting arrows at them. And all he says is, was I not joking? And you excuse yourself because you are funny.
Yeah, the classic thing in high school is like, oh, I was only joking. Don't take it so seriously.
I think too, it's so much of this is about creating a certain culture in the teaching world. They call it the hidden curriculum, this kind of underlying idea and expectations of how we act and what we do. One of the things that they teach, teachers in teacher training programs is that how you model these things contributes to that hidden curriculum. And so if you don't shut down the sarcasm and you allow that to be a part of the classroom culture, then it's only a matter of time before that's normal. And then you have kids, like Caroline was saying, that don't want to participate. And so it really is important to kind of rein that in as best you can, and just speak one-on-one to those kids and be like, hey, look, you're funny. Let's use your powers for good. Let's all enjoy it. Mean, empower them.
I think one of the greatest stories is an apocryphal one, but it works so well, about how all of these mean girls in the 8th grade were basically making fun of the janitor. And they would go into the girls' restroom and they would kind of put on their lipstick, and then they put the lipstick on the mirror. And they were told not to do that because he had to work hard. And so one day the teacher took them all in there with the janitor. And she said, I want you to realize how hard this good man works to keep this place clean. And so he said, janitor, show them what you do. So he took his squeegee, went and put it in the toilet, washed the mirror.
Yes.
No girl ever kissed the mirror again in that school. It's just a great kind of, that's education. That's real teaching of to say, how do we kind of correct?
I guess so. Where that was going. Oh, that was great.
You knew.
I just thought, I was like, this is going to be something horrible. What would I do? And then I started laughing. But I also think the pointing towards the better joke, the joke proper, it's being able to see how clever humor can actually be. And I remember a teacher that I had it was about sort of middle school era. It was Father Boniface of blessed memory. He would often be called in to substitute teach or to be the teacher in the classroom while everyone was doing their homework during one of those kinds of periods in the class. And he would always give us like a selection of things that he would do if we were well behaved. Like at the end, a very popular one was he would do a limerick, but he'd be like improv. So he would ask for, give me a name, give me a place, and he would always weave it in. And just seeing how you can be clever and funny, I definitely remember that sort of scratching an itch in my brain that I really liked that. And that was way better than just, simply, being crude or just choosing very cruel jokes that really weren't that clever.
And that was fun for him too. Like, give me a word. Give me.
Oh yeah, and he was a brilliant man. I remember there was a story that went around the entire school that he was looking after one of those classes where everyone was meant to be doing their homework, and then he had to leave the classroom for a moment to speak to somebody who had turned up outside the class. So he got up, went and spoke to them. When he came back, he then started pointing at the children because what they'd done is they'd changed their desks, they changed their positions. And this guy was really smart, photographic memory. So he said, right, you go back to your original desks, and you now have detention. And everyone else thought that was awesome.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's good.
Well, the end of your book is Tricks of the Trade, and you then have a concluding chapter where you wrap everything up. So as we wrap up this podcast, do you have any closing thoughts for our listeners?
Any teachers who happen to find their way into this book, or I think what I want them to understand that we get how difficult the job is and that there's so many challenges that it presents. And we're not trying to add something else to an already overflowing plate.
So, I have to be funny too now?
Right, exactly. We're just trying to remind them how much fun, this job can be. And it's not going to be fun every day. And there's not going to be laughter all of the time. And there will be times where, it's you have to sit with a kid who's, really upset or, that all exists. But I think it's just a helpful, just kind of paradigm shift to be like, you know what, it's worth it to think about why did we laugh today? How did we laugh today? I just think that's worthwhile. So I hope that people can understand that. Yeah,
And how much fun middle schoolers can be.
of course. Yeah.
I think too, what we were really trying to do is, as Cary and Caroline said, is really encourage teachers to realize they don't have to be stand-up comedians. It's best just to ask kids, what have you laughed at? Because they're not even thinking about what they've laughed at. C.S. Lewis uses two verbs to grasp the meaning of to know something: savoir and connaître. I mean, it's like meditation in a tool shed. You look along something, you look at it. And you can study laughter. You can kind of understand how the mechanics of it work, the Duchenne smile or whatever, or you can just experience it. And to have students realize you can experience it, not just learn about things in class, but you can experience laughter in class. And we want to help you remember what you laughed at and then kind of analyze it. But you've got to remember you are laughing at times and try to hold on to those memories. And the more you remember your laughter, the more it will inhabit you.
Which is so great in this day and age where there's so much in, teenagers, there's so much depression and anxiety that they face. And to help encourage them that, look, you are laughing. We can look. Let's think about why. And I think that's just an amazing thing.
Well, where can listeners go to find out more about you guys and pick up your book?
They can come to our houses in Virginia Beach. Come to Virginia Beach when it gets really cold out there in Wisconsin or wherever, and or Amazon or Barnes and Noble. It's just fun. And again, too, that's Dame Folly, who is in her lecture talking to the students of Erasmus from Praise of Folly. But it's just it's there. The money all goes to Caroline and Cary because they have teacher salary. In fact, none of it comes to me. So, and Caroline is home with another baby. So there's one income there.
I like to call myself a retired teacher.
That's right. So,
at 30.
So all of the proceeds of this book go to feed starving children.
Yes.
Now, they're little whales. All these little whales out there.
Oh, stop it.
Oh, no.
The family group can be just called a pod, which I think sounds rather sweet.
Yes.
Pod.
Well, I hear the call for final drinks. So thanks to our guests for coming on the show, Terry, Cary, and Caroline. And our stenographer, Julia, our sound engineers, Taylor and Sarah, our patron supporters, particularly our top-tier supporters, Ryan, Dan, Jody, Dave, Brian, Meg, Rebecca, Sarah, Mark, Kevin, Paul, Bud, James, Robert, Mark, Matt, Erica, Joelle, Amanda, Thomas, Shane, Becca, Paul, Gary, Stephen, John, James, Kate, Peter, David, Rowdy, and Angela. And, of course, all of you for listening. All the co-hosts pray for our listeners every time we release an episode. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on YouTube for the rest of the season. And please join us again next time,
when we'll continue
going further up
and further in.
Cheers.
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 Cheers.